The notion that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a claim that has been circulating among certain groups, particularly those with strong conservative or evangelical roots. This perspective argues that climate change is not a genuine scientific concern, but rather a fabricated issue designed to control and manipulate Christians into accepting a particular ideology or agenda. However, a closer examination of this claim reveals the complex web of misconceptions, misinformation, and misunderstanding of the scientific consensus on climate change. Firstly, the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change is clear: human activities, particularly the emission of greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels and deforestation, are significantly contributing to the increase in global temperatures. This conclusion is based on decades of research by thousands of scientists from around the world, using multiple lines of evidence from various fields of study, including physics, chemistry, biology, and geology. The evidence includes temperature records, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and shifts in the distribution of plants and animals. The argument that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians often relies on the idea that the scientific community is motivated by a secular or liberal agenda that is hostile to Christian values. However, this assertion is not supported by evidence. The scientific method is designed to be objective and unbiased, with the goal of understanding the natural world through empirical evidence and testable hypotheses. Scientists from diverse backgrounds, including Christians, are involved in climate change research, and their findings are subject to rigorous peer review and scrutiny. Moreover, many Christian leaders and organizations have recognized the urgency of the climate crisis and are actively working to address it. The Vatican, for example, has issued statements emphasizing the importance of caring for creation and mitigating climate change. The Evangelical Environmental Network, a coalition of evangelical Christians, has also emphasized the need for action on climate change, citing biblical teachings on stewardship and care for the poor and vulnerable. Another misconception underlying the claim that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is the idea that addressing climate change requires a rejection of Christian values or acceptance of a particular ideological agenda. However, this is not the case. Climate change is a moral and ethical issue that resonates with core Christian values, such as justice, compassion, and stewardship. Christians are called to care for the poor and vulnerable, who are often disproportionately affected by climate change. They are also called to be good stewards of God's creation, which includes protecting the natural world and preserving it for future generations. Furthermore, the claim that climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians often relies on misinformation and cherry-picked data. For example, some argue that climate change is not happening because there was a pause in global temperature increase between 1998 and 2013. However, this pause was a short-term fluctuation that has been explained by natural climate variability, and the long-term trend of global warming remains clear. Others argue that climate change is not caused by human activities, but this claim is contradicted by the overwhelming scientific evidence, including the clear fingerprint of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. In conclusion, the claim that the science on climate change is a lie to manipulate Christians is a complex and multifaceted issue that relies on misconceptions, misinformation, and misunderstanding of the scientific consensus. The scientific evidence on climate change is clear, and it is not motivated by a particular ideological or secular agenda. Rather, it is a call to action that resonates with core Christian values, such as justice, compassion, and stewardship. Christians, like people of all faiths and backgrounds, have a moral and ethical obligation to care for creation and address the urgent issue of climate change. By working together and relying on the best available scientific evidence, we can build a more just and sustainable world for all.